Julie and I are very passionate about making sure that we discuss bullying and students with disabilities. And Michelle Garcia Winter was kind enough to go through with us both the school-wide approach to using social thinking for students with disabilities surrounding the issues of bullying, as well as how you incorporate into a child's individual IEP, individualized education program, social thinking to assist the student with regard to bullying.
So one of the big hot topics, unfortunately, in our country today is bullying, and especially of students who have disabilities with invisible disabilities. And I'm a big believer in the work that I do that if a student is being bullied, that it really needs to be an important aspect of the IEP, so that the student understands how to identify it and what to do with it. How does social thinking work into what your advice might be on how to address bullying through the IEP?
It's a tricky one, and there's many thoughts around this, and that is because there's a guy out there, Dr. Frank Sacco. He's on the East Coast, and I've had him speak at my conference, and he will talk about that in order to truly control bullying, it has to be systemic, and it can't be that we're going to stop the bullies, but instead we have to make a more active bystander community, and we've got to get kids seeking us supports and not accepting that they watch someone bully another kid, right? So Frank is and his team and people who work out of similar methodologies, the research is showing that really, if you really want to control bullying, you've got to do a team intervention around a whole culture at the school and not take it at the individual level of just the IEP.
So
let me keep going with that. At the individual level of the IEP, we obviously, if a kid is getting bullied, one of the first things we want to look at is, does he even know he's being bullied? Because we have kids who really think, their brains don't make it easy for them to understand the intentions of others. So if they're being asked to give somebody $1 and every day someone says, I'll pay you back, and boy, you're a nice guy, and give me another $1, and they never get any money back, they think they're being a nice guy. And we tell them in school, hey, we got pretty decent kids at this school. Like, I know the other schools got problems, but we're really nice. Everyone's your friend here. So now you get this more literal mind, has no idea that he's being taken advantage of. I've worked with adults who are being taken advantage of. So one of the challenging things is in social thinking, we're not one set of tools, but we're kind of looking in many different directions. And one of the things that I've looked at and explained I do have a lot of free articles for this stuff on my website, is that there's different levels of the social mind. So I have some kids who are really clueless, and parents even describe them as, my kid is smart but clueless. He looks but he doesn't see what's going on around him. And he may not be able to get to a really sharp place, especially in the year's term of an IP, to read each other's motives and intentions, because that's what we're asking. Right? To protect yourself, you got to read someone else's motives. Well, wait a minute. That kid never learned point of view just from playing in the sandbox. In fact, that kid was probably so busy building Lego structures, he never looked up to notice he was even playing with other kids around him. And so now we go, okay, not all problems are going to be solved in the term length of a year's IEP, but what I would do is, rather than tackle, here's what we're going to teach this kid to avoid bullying, I'm going to say, hey, as part of the Common Core standard, this kid's got to understand point of view. Now, his lack of point of view makes him more susceptible to bullying. So we're going to be working with him on understanding that not everyone's your friend, and what kind of people, like I have things I work with kids on, is who's your friend, who's a friendly acquaintance, who are other people you just don't know, and who are evil others. And we start to categorize people because, again, our guys are linear. And then we start to understand, all right, now how do you behave with someone who's friendly, different from a friendly acquaintance versus someone you don't know at all, because you're not supposed to behave the same way. And that gets tricky. Now, some parents are listening in and they've got 3- and 4-year-olds. That's too complicated a lesson for 3- and 4-year-olds. And some of the parents are listening in, they've got 8-year-olds, and we go, okay, depending on how tuned in this kid is, we're doing that same lesson at times with 16, 25-year-olds. Because some of our kids have really significant difficulties learning about other people's perspective just from how their brain was born. And other kids can understand enough to understand people have perspective, and they're starting to understand when they're being bullied, But I've had kids tell me it was terrible when people stopped bullying me because now no one paid any attention to me at all. I would rather be bullied than be completely shunned from the school. So it gets into nobody truly wants to be bullied, but everybody does want to have some sense of inclusion.
Right.
So now we're going to also, through the IEP, figure out how can we help this kid to feel included, because the peer group is the hardest judge. And the peer groups, we like to think that we're a very inclusive people. And across the world, we like to think we're very inclusive. But if you really study your own life, you'll find that you're naturally exclusive. We're comfortable in our communities. We limit who we give access to us. And then we actively discourage other people from being part. And that's you and me.
Yeah.
That's just the human brain. So it's a little bit of wishful thinking, and I know some people won't like me saying this, to think that you set up an inclusion program and that kids are naturally inclusive. You and I are not naturally inclusive of everybody. Now we may see, oh, there's the new person at work, let's work to make them feel welcome, but we don't make them feel welcome all year. We'll work to make them feel welcome the first week, and after that you got to sort it out for yourself. So how do we do that with kids? With kids with disabilities, we try to set up mentor training programs. So we get other kids on campus who are more expert players to be trained in some of the concepts of social thinking, social skills, and we teach them how to encourage and support the kid with disabilities. And oh, by the way, by doing that, we're helping them to be a more active bystander. So if we see another person come over and not be so nice to them, we also teach that kid, stand up for him, step in, help out with that kid around that. I'm also going to jump in and say something politically very incorrect, but and that is when I have different levels of the social mind. I talk about a different level of the social radar, or different levels of social awareness. And we have, like, the smart but clueless kids are not that aware of what's going on around them. They tend to be more literal. They can be very bright in science, but not so great in language arts. And then we get kids who are more aware of what's going on, but they struggle with the nuance of how to actually connect in that. And when we get kids who start to have awareness that they're not being treated well or included the way they wish they were, that they may be bullied, and they can also be bullies. So the research in the bully victim is some kids are bullied, some kids are bullies, some kids are victims, and then there's a whole group of kids who are bully victims. They are bullies and they are victims. And so it gets really tricky to start to just say, are you the bully or are you the victim? And I saw that at my own clinic. I would see kids come into work together, and I would see another kid being really mean to, they're just not being nice to each other. But then the kid who did something that wasn't nice to this kid, then this kid responded by not being nice back to the kid who was originally not nice, and then this kid's going, he bullied me, did you just see that? So when you get up to the kids who start to blend into the invisible disability, it's fraught with complexity, and there's just no clear, my kid's always being bullied. I have had kids who are bullied totally innocently, but often when I see kids who are perpetually deeply being bullied, I often see, and this is not always, but when I see this play off, I always first then want to go back and check that kid's not being a provocative person in the situation who's getting people to team up on them. Now, I definitely have seen kids who are just outsiders and kids team up on them, and they've done nothing to incite it, but I need to sort that out first, depend on the intervention around that.
Well, I know I asked you the $1 million question on that one. That's not an easy one. But
No.
Appreciate your insight,
but I
for
think
sure.
If you know my work, I try to be totally fair, and I'm not quick to, I've learned a lot in 20 years of focusing on complex kids, and that is get your information really down about this kid, and don't just listen to what he's telling you, because if I'm working with a kid with poor perspective taking, they only see it from their point of view. And they don't understand that actually somebody might have even been trying to help them, but they were saying, hey, the person was trying to be mean to me. And so it's always try to see it. And sometimes you have to seek that other perspective or teach them how to be better at figuring out the other point of view.
We so appreciate Michelle's insights on bullying. And in fact, we want to emphasize the fact that bullying can be addressed through the IEP, the Individualized Education Program.
And Julie and I felt so strongly about that we have an entire series on our website, www.yourspecialeducationrights.com, that focuses entirely on bullying and kids with disabilities. Check it out.